Today we're going to have a conversation with the director of the Mississippi State University Center for Entrepreneurship and Outreach, and that is Eric Hill. Eric, we'll start with the definition of entrepreneurship. It used to be sort of a catchy buzzword. Now it's gone mainstream, maybe even seems a bit cliche. What is entrepreneurship to you, in your words?
Yeah, absolutely. Entrepreneurship is about starting something new that changes the way we think, live, operate, or do things that we're trying to accomplish in life. And of course, there's a profit motivation in that that extends from the owners to the shareholders and other employees and members of the company. But to me, it's a way to really change the way we do things as a society.
Why do you think entrepreneurship has taken hold the way it has in universities around the country?
Well, it really makes sense, right? Because universities are sort of these epicenters of thinking of new ways to do things. One, you're training sort of raw talent and raw, unrefined energy. And so I think it makes sense because that's a ripe environment to come up with new ways to do things. And students are also sort of in the best time of their life to take the step and run because they don't have a lot of life overhead yet. They don't have a lot of commitments. And you have all the time benefit of being able to mess up a few times and still be successful in life.
So can you teach entrepreneurship? Does some of it need to be ingrained in the individual? How does that balance out?
The old nature nurture discussion is hot as ever in entrepreneurship education, if you will. I'm of the camp. I believe that the skills can be taught. Right? I mean, there is indeed a process to start something and take it all the way to fruition. But there's also a personal development side of your own mental state, your appetite for risk, your appetite to be disruptive, and probably a little bit of sprinkling on some craziness too. So I think all those ingredients come together. But you can inspire people and you can teach them the skill set. But the inner drive or risk appetite, I think that's a lot harder to really assess. But sometimes just pointing out that, hey, this is a component of it is enough to move the needle and get somebody to go. So from that standpoint, I believe anybody can be an entrepreneur. There's no background you have to do it, and that's personal philosophy of Eric Hill anyway. So.
Well, you've developed the model that's used to develop entrepreneurs at Mississippi State University. Your degree is in engineering. So how did you come to be an entrepreneur? You tell us about your businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that the bulk of what I've done has come out of personal problems that I've experienced and felt like, okay, others probably have experienced these as well. And I think that's a great path for lots of companies to start. And so you're right. And we had a lot of help, of course, in developing the venture catalyst process. Mr. Wade Patterson, an alum from electrical engineering graduate as well, was instrumental in making that happen and continuing it on. But I would say the root of all great startups comes from experiencing a problem. And, of course, not all problems are valuable and not all people have the same problems, but it's a great place to start. And, engineers are sort of programmed to do that, and that we train them here to come up with solutions for problems. And the piece that our process, Venture Catalyst, really focuses on is about trying to figure out, does the general population, or is there a market or other human beings that care about that problem so much so that they're willing to change their behavior? That's a lot harder question to solve. And you can have a great invention or piece of technology, but if nobody cares, then there's not necessarily a business there. It may be intellectually valuable, but there may not be a business there.
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to have sales, right? I mean, you've got to be able to sell it. So it can't just be a great idea. Tell us about your first entrepreneurial venture.
Well, my parents would say that it was back when I was in elementary school. I had Eric's paper airplanes, and I claimed that they were the longest flying airplanes that 50 cents could buy. And the school actually shut down that venture because I was taking kids' lunch money for selling these paper airplanes. So that's the humorous one. But no, the first real business we started with a friend of mine and I doing on-end jobs, fixing computers. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s when, it still was hard to connect the printer and make it all work. So we helped with that, and then saw an opportunity to move into website management where, again, the internet was still kind of hard to create and maintain a website. And so we started doing that for customers and grew to have clients in over 15 states, a couple national accounts before selling it in, I think, 2012, 2011, somewhere in there. So we ran that about 5 years before exiting out of that. That was my first real experience in trying to figure out, how, as you say, how do you get sales? And Jeff, it took a lot of us taking jobs that we weren't really sure how to do, but we knew we had the right team to kind of figure out the solution for it. And you get a few of those wins of the right clients that are connected, and then all of a sudden you got a nice little healthy business. And that was ours. There was a degree of luck involved in that, but also a lot of team building and trusting people to execute.
You mentioned team, and I think that's a critical component. What should entrepreneurs think about when putting together their team? Is it the most important thing to get your best buddies together because y'all like each other, or do you need to bring different points of view, personalities in? What are some tips you could give on putting your team together?
That you are pointing into probably the deepest question that I think is most overlooked and perhaps most important in starting a business. And my belief is that the key ingredient of the right team is the ability to work through problems and still be friends at the end of the night. And because in a startup, things go wrong all the time, and when they go wrong, they're usually what feels like catastrophes. And because of that, you often have disagreement on how to solve it. And those disagreements are really passionate because of what's on the line, right? Everything's on the line in most cases. So to me, one of the most important things is that you can have a professional argument and still like each other at the end of the night. And then the second part is people are sort of naturally inclined to gravitate towards people that are at least at some level like them or see the world similarly. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want in forming a team. You really want to say, all right, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? And how do I fill the missing ingredient of my weaknesses? And these are not necessarily concrete, tangible, missing skills per se. It's really the paradigm of how you see the world, right? It's a life perspective that's different. It's an execution perspective that's different. So in an ideal way, you find somebody that really complements that well, and you have a natural ability to work through problems. So just as a last thought on that, I mean, a lot of people say don't start a business with your friend, and I know where that's coming from, and that's probably from some level good advice, but I can say 2 of my businesses were started with friends. And because of our friendship, it was sort of a binding factor of when things got tough, at the end of the day, there was still a friendship that kept the band together, right? And I think to me, I think that's one of the more important things to have in a team.
So you've got this idea and you're laser focused on it. You've got your team and you get out there and the market doesn't respond exactly the way you thought, but perhaps responded in a positive manner, but you're going to have to pivot a little bit. How important is it to be able to make that determination to pivot? And I think there's a great example in the E-Center with Glow on that.
Yeah, so I don't know the stats, but we can just say the law of numbers say pretty much every business gets it wrong out of the gate. There's some component or assumption that is wrong. And, entrepreneurship is humbling in that fact because, you can work for years crafting this amazing thing and put it in front of people and they just are like, don't care. Or I tell people all the time with an app, you can make an app which takes a lot of time, energy, and money. And think about the last time you downloaded an app, you put it on your phone, 30 seconds later, if you're not impressed, it's gone, you're never downloading it again. And so that's the bar, right, of making a product that people will like. And so to your point, you have to be really, really receptive to that kind of feedback early on when you're launching something. I mean, we messed this up in one of the companies that I started called Sports Snacks. We got a call kind of out of left field that wasn't anywhere related to our target market, but they loved what we had built, and we sort of were like, yeah, but you're not our customer, and it may have saved the business had we listened to that. But it's easy to get kind of myopic, and you have to be really, really attenuated to what are signals around me that are saying, hey, you might need to change, and oh, by the way, this is probably a more lucrative market opportunity. There's great books written on this because it's something every founder faces, but it's critically important.
For entrepreneurs, you can reach a stage where it's time to raise some capital, and that can be very exciting, but absolutely, completely nerve-wracking if you don't have the skill set or the expertise to do it. What advice would you give to startups as far as knowing when it's time to go out, knowing where to look for the capital, knowing the types of person, the people you need to partner with, and how much you're going to need? That's always a question.
Yeah, well, you just asked a very loaded question, right? There are a lot of things that go into each aspect that you discussed, and that's a lot of where we spend our time at the E-Center is helping a startup figure that out. What I would say from a broad stroke standpoint is you always want to wait as long as you can to take money, because as soon as you take money, the game changes. All of a sudden, there's a pressure on the company to perform as a company. You don't get as much time to mess up, so to speak. The other thing to remember is for investors, this is an investment, right? They are looking at your startup the same as they're looking at the opportunity cost of parking the multi-$100,000 into something else. And so why would anybody invest in a company that's brand new versus putting it all on the market and the funds that they know they're going to get nominally 8-10%, right? So the only reason they're doing that is because you have to show them the opportunity to make a ridiculous time multiple of their investment, right? 10, 20, 30 times their money, because the statistics show that the bulk of these ventures will fail. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but the point is to say that most investors, yes, they invest in people because they trust people, but at the end of the day, it's about mechanics of the investment, and it's got to be an investment, not just an idea. And that's a big difference that a lot of entrepreneurs kind of fail to recognize, that the nuance in that it's no longer about selling the product to a customer, it's about selling the investment opportunity to an investor, and that's a big difference.
How in the world do students ever know how to tackle that one? That is complicated, sophisticated. So how does an entrepreneur find the resources to know how to do that?
Well, and Jeff, that's what we do every day in the E-Center is we help kind of be guides in that process. But what I would say is, and what I love about working with students versus any other clientele that we engage with, is students are very coachable, and they don't see boundaries where sometimes people have been out and working somewhere for years and years and years. They see these invisible boundaries. So, I give the example where I was coaching a student once and said, hey, you need to get advice on this. Well, she just opened up LinkedIn, found the CEO, messaged them, and got a response, right? And so sometimes people who have been out in corporate America, if you will, would say, well, I can't call the president of this company. They'll never take my call. That's somebody way up there. And so the same thing is true with students when they're raising money, is they see there are no boundaries here and they can go. And it's our job to sort of make sure they don't make too many faux pas along the way, although they will. And that's the bulk of our job here.
Well, and it may sound odd to some that when you start a business, and if you're an entrepreneur and you start an entrepreneurial endeavor, that not only are you thinking about how to start the business and how to grow the business, but you also need to start thinking about how you get out of the business. It's the exit strategy. Where does that come into play with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the very beginning, right? You have to have a plan for what happens with this company if everything goes right. And so from the exit standpoint, entrepreneurs sort of, or when you first talk about this, it kind of bums people out because they say, well, if I'm changing the world, I want to do that for my life. And that's well and good, and you can do that, right? And there are examples of that. But the investors have to have a way out because they can't capture a return on their money if not. And so sometimes it may be you raise a bigger round with a different group that buys out the original investors. Now they have their exit out. But at any rate, you kind of have to use the exit discussion as an exercise to say, where does my opportunity fit in with the rest of the world, right? If we're building something that is amazing and changes things, there are other companies that should want to acquire us as part of what they're doing. And so I look at exit as a message of context of where does your vision of disrupting something, where does it fit within the equation of the rest of the market? And if you don't understand that, it's usually less of an indicator about the investment to me. It's more of a lack of understanding of where your problem fits in with the rest of the world.
So it wasn't too long ago where the entrepreneurship landscape in Mississippi seemed a little barren, almost like the surface of the moon. But that has evolved and is evolving. Where do you see it now? Where do you think it's headed?
Well, what a great question. And I have long felt that the only thing holding Mississippi back is its own belief in itself to do great things. And I think one of the things that's changing is we are seeing more homegrown talent do great things in what we say is sort of modern context. I mean, business has always been huge in Mississippi, but the difference is this sort of like tech, new product, interesting startups that you would typically associate with Silicon Valley or Austin or elsewhere. That has been dry in Mississippi. But now that you're seeing some wins, I think it is inspiring others to say, oh, if I didn't grow up with parents or I'm a first generation college student, I can do this too. And there's a path to do it here. That's to me what has changed, is that there's this belief that's changed. And I think part of that is the state and the state leaders and others are also believing, hey, Mississippi can do this too. And hey, we should probably invest or support programs that are supporting it. And so it truly is the whole team is kind of rallying behind, hey, these tech entrepreneurs, these young, bright people that are building great things are really the future of Mississippi and are what builds wealth here rather than just sort of exporting talent. We're building wealth that stays here and gets reinvested. And a small anecdote of that, there's a company out of Oxford actually that was very successful, had a really, really nice 9-digit exit, and that created 25 millionaires in Mississippi. And the reason that's such a powerful story is that wealth stayed here and is now getting reinvested in other startups here. And that's what excites me, because some 25, 30-year-old here in Starkville can start a great company, have an exit, and now they're here. And imagine what they're going to do for the next decades of investing that wealth back in the community.
And specifically here at Mississippi State University, there is a robust program for students wanting to start their own businesses here.
There is, and it has a small proven track record now. I mean, there have been at least 6 or 7 deals that have gotten their first, sometimes second or third round angel investment. And if you sum up that portfolio right now, it's worth in excess of $17 million in value. Those companies are here. Those founders are legitimate millionaires on paper that are under the age of 30 in most cases. And so it gets real very quickly. We've got a couple student startups right now that I think within the next 6 months, 3 or 4 of them will end up raising multi-$100,000 round or $100,000 rounds. And again, those will be on valuations in the several hundred to millions of dollars. So it gets real very quickly.
And it's important for students at Mississippi State to understand that even though the E-Center is housed in the College of Business, it is open to every single student. And all it takes is literally, Eric, them walking in the door and saying, how do I sign up? It literally is that simple, right?
That's exactly right. Great ideas come from doing things in the world and seeing problems. So it makes sense that a lot of students in other disciplines outside the College of Business are coming up with great problems and great business opportunities with them. And so, yeah, the first action, I mean, you go to our website, there's a big red button that says get started here. It will take you to a calendar where you book a meeting with us, and we will sit there and just riff on the idea with you to try to, tease out the greatness of it and see, hey, is there a market opportunity? And, we don't decide whether it's a good or bad idea. The process helps you figure out if it is. Because people come in all the time and say, "Hey, is my idea any good?" And I say, "I don't know," because it's really your market has to tell you it's a good idea, and it's our job to help you figure out how to find out from the market if it's a good idea. But the process is well defined, it's published, and that's one of the nice things is you know where you're going with it. And so that's, getting started is indeed as simple as walking in.
Eric Hill, the director of the Mississippi State University Center for Entrepreneurship and Outreach. Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.